The Force of Others, a Star Wars podcast. Hello there, and welcome to The Force of Others. I'm Zachary Owen Turner, and today I am solo in the cockpit, but that's okay because we're going to the races. That's right, we're talking about all things racing in the Star Wars galaxy today. Now, before we get into everything about the lore of racing and all the different types of racing, we got 2 new trailers this week. We're eating good when it comes to video game trailers. Matt is so excited for Zero Company, and we have a short clip about that. Although he's not with us today, we have him in the HoloNet with us, so I'm going to send it on over to Matt with his thoughts on Zero Company.
General Skywalker.
Star Wars Zero Company is my most anticipated Star Wars game to still to come out this year. I'm not a big RTS real-time strategy guy, but I am a big story guy when it comes to my games. I love that there's going to be permadeath of NPCs. Not that I want characters to die, but I like that they can't. I love that you have what look like just almost infinite choices in putting your team together to go on the missions. I am hoping that it leans heavy on the narrative and not as strong on the crunchy, super RTS, super nitty-gritty, but everything that I'm seeing so far I really, really like. Star Wars Zero Company, can't wait.
I totally agree with Matt. Zero Company looks super interesting. I'm very curious about this permadeath and how that works in this. We see in the trailer that they, memorialize these different characters as they die. Some people think that that little Anakin shot at the very end means that he's gonna be on your team. I don't think that's gonna be true. I think it'll kind of be like a hero that drops in to help because you can't permadeath kill Anakin, and that seems to be part of it. I love all the customization that we're getting, the different suits for the different characters, how your team gets made up. I also am not super into real-time strategy games. However, I did sunk 200 hours into Baldur's Gate 3, so maybe I'll be just fine. Either way, this game looks super fun, super excited about it. Love seeing more Clone Wars stuff, and such a great place to put in characters that can die or, just really smart conceptually. But speaking of video games that are coming out, now, I might be wrong, but Galactic Racer is my most anticipated game of the year. And we just got a new story trailer. And Sebulba is not just a side character. He is the main antagonist, it seems, or it's secondary antagonist to this game, which is awesome. Sebulba's living it up good. He's eating good, jumping into different racers, not just pod racers, but all racers in general. He's the GOAT, and he always has been. This trailer has got me even more hyped. You don't need a good story for a good racing game, but it does really help, doesn't it? It helps when you have good racing, it helps the immersion and gives you something to upgrade for. So I'm very excited about the story beats that have been in the trailer. I sincerely hope that we get more customization with the characters and not just the ships. We've seen some different skins on ships, but I want to go in there and tinker. I want to be like, okay, cool. Do I want to add some, nitrous on here or hyperspeed fuel on there and see what happens? We'll see what happens with that. Either way, I'm super excited, and we're going to talk more about racing. Galactic Racer, all the different racing in Star Wars. Let's get into the lore bit. All right, today we're talking about the 4 different types of racing that are included in Galactic Racer, which are pod racers, speeder bikes, Landspeeders, and Skim speeders. And then we're going to talk about some other types of racing and, even ones that I had never heard of, which I am super excited to share with you. So let's get into pod racing. The Nascar of Star Wars. The classic, iconic sci-fi chariots tethered to massive twin engines. This high-speed sport includes one-man crafts that are hooked up to 2 to 4 giant engines that go so fast that only one human has ever been able to compete. That being Anakin, of course, winning the Boon to Eve Classic. Anakin later races again in the book's Padawan's Pride to infiltrate a pod racing ring on behalf of the Jedi, and he wants to do good because he wants his mom to hear about him, which is just so heart-filling. Pod racing also requires great mechanical skill as well. We've seen that in Phantom Menace. Anakin is there tinkering, and when things go wrong, you have to do all of the engineering on the fly, knowing the craft inside and out to be able to upkeep the racer. Racers also had a team of pit droids, sometimes humanoid, to help them make repairs quick in between laps if needed, much like a modern NASCAR race. We see this in Phantom Menace as well. One of them pulls off when his racer is not functioning well, and the pit droids try and fix it, and then explode the racer, and he goes, "Podo!" There are many different pod races in the galaxy, especially on different worlds. Tatooine, Aqualaris, Malastare is mentioned both in-game and by Qui-Gon, who goes, "Oh, they have pod racing on Malastare. Very dangerous." Mongaza, Uvu 4, Ord Ibana, Ando Prime, and Barunda. Those are all detailed in Episode 1 Racer, some of which are canon, some of which are not. In Galactic Racer, we are returning to Tatooine, Ando Prime, Lantana, Sentinel-1, and Jakku. Why is everybody going back to Jakku? Because there's races on it. That's why, Finn. Boonta Eve Classic is the biggest of all the races for pod racing, and also the highest mortality rate. Only 6 out of the 18 racers survived in the 32 BBY race, the race we see in Episode 1. That's a whopping 33%. Due to this, pod racers were seen as roguish outlaws and had huge following. Yes, even Ben Quadraneros had that, fangirls, fanboys, fan they thems, looking after him while he was racing. We also see later in a Clone Wars episode that Ben Quadraneros and Sebulba go on to be great rivals. We see a poster in Anakin's Jedi room in the temple, which is just so funny to me, especially because they're both returning in Galactic Racer. Pod racing was outlawed eventually by the New Republic due to its dangerous nature. Despite this, the sport was still practiced on certain remote worlds such as Batuu, which is, if you don't know, the world that you go to when you go to Galaxy's Edge in Disney World or Disneyland, and Vespara. And in the timeline of Galactic Racer holds many of the Outer Rim planets. So this is a very interesting because we know Galactic Racer is set, I think, post-Empire in New Republic. So because we're going to Jakku. So to see how it's outlawed might be a story beat that we might be getting. It is also said that in some fanfics that Anakin would sneak off to participate in underground pod races on Coruscant to clear his head. I know there's a very famous Tumblr post that went out on that. But that's all things pod racing. We could go on for hours about pod racing. We could get into all the different pod racers. If that's what you want to see, let me know and we will do so. But to go on to different types of racing that you'll see in Galactic Racer, speeder bikes. They're like horses, but faster. One of the new additions to Galactic Racer, but not new to the universe by any means, speeder bikes. Who among us did not want to strap into a speeder when Luke and Leia were racing away from scout troopers on the forest moon of Endor? Speeder bike racing, also sometimes known as swoop bike racing, has been around in lore longer than pod racing. Han Solo is said to have grown up racing speeder bikes on Corellia, among other ships, and according to Galactic Racer, speeder bikes are fast and ferocious. You'll be braking heavily into corners, really leaning in, and then massive drops of acceleration as you power your way through the exit. Speeder and swoop bikes come in all different shapes and sizes as well, from Darth Maul and Count Dooku's U-shaped Razalon FC-20 to Enfys Nest's modified KLE Mercedes Skyblade 330. They all come in different sizes. Mando's bike on Tatooine is a swoop bike, but they're speeder bikes when they're on Endor, even though they look very similar. So from all of my research, they seem to be interchangeable. We've also found out that some of the races are mixed races, so speeder bikes going up against Landspeeders, going against other different types of speeders. Probably not pod racers because those would all blow the rest out of the sky, but it can be very dangerous to be on a speeder bike. Now in Knights of the Old Republic, we get a swoop bike racing, and those look very different than what canon it has made swoop and speeder bikes to be. But we'll talk about that in a second. I promise, I know you're thinking about it, but we'll get to it in just a second. Landspeeders, an ode to George Lucas. Landspeeders are iconic to Star Wars as any other ship, especially Luke's X-37. They are George Lucas's ode to the 50s hot rods and his love of cars. Landspeeders come in all shapes and sizes, and it's no wonder why they became popular for racing, especially for humans who could not handle the G-force and quick reactions necessary for pod racing. Han Solo can be seen driving a Landspeeder in Solo: A Star Wars Story. We also know that Han Solo goes on to lead his own team of racers following the events of Return of the Jedi. Sometime after his departure from his marriage, he becomes a race lead captain and can't, let these flunkies do it themselves. He jumps into the cockpit sometimes winning the race but being disqualified, as we've seen in the Hunt for the Millennium Falcon comic book. Landspeeders are heavier, grounded repulsor crafts that offer steady handling and are built to withstand heavy impacts from rival racers, according to Galactic Racer. And they even had a Boonta race of their own, but this time it was on the planet Boonta and can be seen in the 80s cartoons Droids. So this was probably George Lucas thinking about the Boonta Eve, pod racing future, but just like early motifs. But you see C-3PO and R2-D2 infiltrate this speeder race on the Boonta Classic. It also, in canon, takes place a week after Boonta Eve, so it's very silly and fun, but I just like that little lore bit. Skim speeders. Now, these are new to Galactic Racer, but I think they're also new to the universe, but actually not, because the Skim speeders look exactly like the Knights of the Old Republic swoop bikes to me. I told you we'd talk about it. In Galactic Racer, they're introduced as Skim speeders, a new agile class of speeder suited for highly reactive precision steering across different planetary hazards. To me, these look exactly like the KOTOR swoop bikes, with cockpit and 2 engines. Skim speeders were a type of speeder in the racing on the planet of Ando Prime during the New Republic era, and Skim speeders were capable of making sharp turns with the knife edge capability, and that is where the speeder itself turns on its side. So these speeders seem to be able to offer more maneuverability while still being fast. It's very fun to see. I'm very excited to see how they will go up against your land speeders and your speeder bikes. Again, I don't think that pod racers will be in that mixed racing, but that is all the different types of racing in Galactic Racer. Again, I am very excited for this game, my most anticipated game of the year. And now for some other racing types. Starship Racing. You know these from the Station Colossus on the water planet of Castellan in Star Wars Resistance. In fact, one of the characters from that show shows up in the trailer for the Galactic Racer. That is Griff Halloran, the former TIE fighter pilot. He can even be seen wearing his iconic skull TIE fighter helmet. But don't worry, he was an Imperial defector. How does Starship Racing work? Basically, it's like any flying game that you've ever played, where you have rings and different obstacles, and you have to go through all of the different rings, and the first person to make it through all the rings and all of the laps wins. Again, this is seen on the Station Colossus on the water planet of Castellan. As opposed to other starships, racers are often painted bright colors so that the viewers can keep track of the different ships. Moving on to another type of racing, Fathier racing, aka horse racing. These are first seen in The Last Jedi and later expanded upon in Star Wars Outlaws, with history as early as 382 BBY in the High Republic. We see in one of the High Republic books that there is a slang of having a Fathier in the race, essentially having a horse in the race. There are jockeys on top of the Fathiers, and there are favorite Fathiers to win. It's very much a one-to-one with horse racing or dog racing, any type of modern racing that you see with animals in our universe and world. There are hundreds of hollow betting tables around the galaxy, and even rigged races as we see in Outlaws. K-Vest gets tips that this race has been rigged, so it was also a way for crime bosses to launder money as well. The Canto Bight races were especially spicy, especially controversial, as they were often overwork their Fathiers, which led to Rose and Finn breaking them out. Our next racing type is battle racing. This is a continuation of Starship Racing, an evolution, if you will. It's kind of dogfights meet racing. We follow Sebulba in this in a comic. He has a ship called the Widowmaker, which is a cross between a pod racer and a TIE fighter. It kind of has the hull or the cockpit of a TIE fighter with the engines of a pod racer. It's very destructive and even more dangerous type of racing. We know that Sebulba specifically is participating in these races because he owes a lot of money to the Hutts. And so he is actually down on his luck. So I'm curious where we will meet Sebulba. It seems, based off of the story trailer, that this is before that time, at least for Galactic Racer, because he's not down on his luck in that trailer. Also, this is comics, so it could be retconned, but the ship is really cool. The Widowmaker, really great. And then lastly, our last type of racing that I found was actually given to me by Matt. It is called BLOB racing. It's exactly what it sounds like. In Legends, Han and Chewie race across blobs in the Jedi Academy books. What is a blob? It's basically what looks like an amoeba called an Ungolian blob. And they race on tracks containing fine mesh and nails to slow down the blobs. How fast are blobs? Well, fast enough to bet on, and the sport was taken so seriously that on Umgol, that cheating was punishable by death. And that's all racing in the Star Wars universe. A little bit shorter of a video, but we wanted to give you a nice little overview. If you like this lore type of video, let us know. It's something that we want to do a little bit more of as we venture into it. Of course, we are not the Force of Others, you are, so we want to hear from you. Email us your thoughts, forceofothersradio@gmail.com, or go into the comments. We also want to have more of what you want on the show, so if you liked this lore bit, let us know. If there's anything more you want to know, let us know. If you want us to get into all the different racers in the Bunta Eve Classic that we see in episode 1, happy to do that. That would be a very fun lore video, I think. If you want us to go into more about Zero Company and what is going on that planet, or what we can find out, let us know. If you want to know about the different lightsabers and what that means, or any other things, Matt especially is an encyclopedia. I'm like an encyclopedia light, and we would love to talk more about the wars and the lore of the wars. But we have a lot more coming out your way. Some interviews that are lined up, so we're very excited about that. We are going to Rebel ScumCon, so we'll have a lot of stuff with that. Matt and Lance are going to SpaceCon San Antonio, so we're going to have some information about that and some content there. Either way, it's going to be a very fun summer. We're going to kind of get more experimental with our content and do more fun and exciting and different stuff. So let us know what you want. Let us know what you like. And remember, we are not the Force of Others. You are. And the Force of Others will be with you always. The Force of Others, a Star Wars podcast.